Hello friends, we're going to try something a little different on this video. There's no instrument. No, not this time.
Stop recording video. Button.
No, I won't.
Voice off.
What we're going to do is I'm going to try and tell a story. Whenever my friends come to stay, they always ask for stories. And that goes back a long way, and it goes back to when I was little, and my mum used to tell us stories. Sometimes Dad would. And it's an old tradition that goes back many, many years. When visitors would come to stay, you would tell them a story. And I started it when I moved into my second house. And I thought we'd try it here on YouTube. And because this is the first time we've tried it, it might work, it might not, it might be terrible. But we're going to try it. So we're going to try it with the first story I ever heard as a little boy when I was about 2 or 3. And I remember this very well. I remember listening to this on a tape. I was in my mum and dad's room at the time. I think I'd been put there to go to sleep because my brother would have been a baby. Except I couldn't go to sleep because some horrible man was mowing his grass. And so mum or dad put this tape on, and this was the story that I got told. And it's by one of the greatest storytellers ever, Oscar Wilde. The story of the... Thank you. So it is story time officially. The story of the selfish giant. Once upon a time, many years ago, I think it might have been last Tuesday, at around 3:30, there lived a giant. And this was the old-fashioned type of ginormous giant, except this one was a very clever old giant. And he'd been off to visit his friend the Cornish ogre. Devon knows how he'd got back in time, but he had. Anyway, the giant lived in an enormous house with an enormous garden. And every day, while the giant had been away for about 100 years, the children who lived nearby had come to play in the giant's garden. In summertime, the fruit trees would grow fruit, and the children would climb the trees and pick the fruit. Well, when the giant came home and saw these children playing in his garden, he was most upset. Because the giant was old and tired and suffered from rheumatism and bad headaches and indigestion from eating too many chip shops on the way home. And so he burst into the garden and shouted, "Get out! This is a private garden! Be off with you!" And other nasty words like that. Well, children had no choice, did they? They all ran away, screaming, "Ah!" Never came back. And the giant, the next day, got out an enormous hammer, as big as a car exhaust pipe, and decided to build a wall. A wall that was as big as a locomotive train and as high as a council flat. All around the garden. And so the children couldn't get in anymore, and the giant could sit in his basket chair and watch his pocket television and listen to Gardener's Question Time and not be disturbed and pull grumpy faces in peace. Anyway, time passed. The summer came, but it didn't come to the giant's garden. Because, you see, the giant's wall was so high that the clouds had looked over it and they'd gone to the sun and they'd said, "I wouldn't go in there if I were you. The giant's built a great big wall all around the garden." And the sun had said, "Well, I certainly will go in there then. If he's going to build walls all around it, I don't see the point." So the fruit trees did not blossom with fruit. Autumn came, and although leaves fell, they were already long dead, so they weren't that nice autumny colour, and there was no nice smell of autumn. And when the winter came, the snow fell, and old Jack Frost himself said, "I like this garden, only I can come in, the sun won't." And he froze the roots of the trees so they died, and he turned the grass an evil, pale white colour, so it looked like a graveyard. The giant didn't sit out in the garden anymore. It was too cold, and the sun wouldn't come back in. Years passed, and the giant grew even older, and even grumpier, and even horribler, because he didn't see anybody. Until one day, he saw a little boy playing in the garden. The little boy was sitting out on the branch of a tree. He was quite alone, and he was crying. And the giant saw that the little boy was lame. Well, at first the giant was perplexed. How did the little boy get into his garden? But when he saw the tears, the giant's grumpiness faded away at once, and he said, "Little boy, why do you cry so?" Because, stop, Dad. Stop it. No, all right. Because there's no one to play with, the little boy said, and I remember this was such a lovely garden. My brother used to tell me about it, and there used to be fruit on the trees, and there used to be... And he went on like that for about 5 minutes. And the giant cried enormous tears. Each one was as big as a pint of beer, and they plopped noisily into the ice and snow and made big unsafe snowdrifts. The giant knew what he must do. He went to the wall, and he leaned over, and he shouted, because, you see, the children kept coming to the garden out of habit. Someone tried to climb the wall, someone tried to kick it down, someone even told their dads, but the wall wouldn't move. And the giant said, "Children, if you come here, climb up to the wall until you see the branch of this pear tree. If you climb over the branch, you can get into the garden again. And then perhaps the sun will come back." Well, at first, only one brave little boy decided to climb the tree. But when he saw the state of the giant's garden, he called to the others, "Quick, come back, so that the sun will come in again." And soon all the children were climbing over the pear tree until the giant ordered them to stop. But that was only so he could get out his enormous hammer and knock down the wall. In fact, he didn't even bother with a hammer in the end because it was so big. He just raised his big giant fist and biff, down went the wall. And all the children came back in, and the sun came back in laughing happily. And the trees, just like that, started to grow because, you see, it was springtime. And old Jack Frost nipped his own nose and toes in fury and said, "No!" because the garden was a happy place. Day after day the children played, and the giant, although he grew older, grew much happier. He would sit out in his basket chair under the pear tree, with the branch overhanging him to keep the sun off. But every day he asked the children the same question. "Where is your little lame friend who came here the first time?" And every day the answer was the same. "We don't know. We've never seen him before. We only saw him that day, and then he disappeared. We don't know where he lives." Then one beautiful summer's evening, the children were all going home, and the giant was just about to go in for the evening and watch University Challenge on the television, when he saw, on that same branch, the little lame boy was back. There were no tears on his face, though, and he was dressed in robes, but the giant could see that the little lame boy had been in a spot of bother. "Who has hurt you?" he roared as he came up to the little lame boy. "Why are your feet cut? Why are your hands bruised? And who has beaten you about the head?" He could see the marks of thorns on the little boy's head, but the little boy just said, "Shh, no noise now. Many years ago, you invited me into your garden and all my friends. Now, I want you to come to my garden and play with all my friends. My garden is beautiful. It's called Paradise, and I've come to take you to Paradise. Will you come with me?" The giant put out his hand and took the little boy's hand in his, and together they wandered through the garden to the edge of eternity. The next day, when the children came, they found the dead giant lying under the tree, the basket chair turned over and his walking stick beside him, with a look of absolute peace on his face. The children buried him under the tree, and from that day on, they played in the garden, and their children played in it, and their children's children, year after year, century after century. As for the Garden of Paradise, well, no one's actually seen it apart from this story, but we all hope to see it one day. And as for old Jack Frost, well, who cares about him? I don't.
Voiceover on. Camera. 10 minutes. Take picture. But stop recording video.